Hey guys, welcome to Silicon Valley. Thousands of entrepreneurs come here every year to seek funding for their startups. But can you imagine that 60 years ago, there was no such thing as Silicon Valley and this culture did not exist? Today we're going to talk about how this culture evolved here in Silicon Valley, and we're going to start talking right here at Stanford University. So if you're interested, continue watching this video. Stanford itself is the largest property owner in Silicon Valley. It's not just one of the best universities, it owns its land. So Stanford campuses are on Stanford's land. Stanford Shopping Center, one of my favorite shopping centers. A lot of tech companies lease Stanford's land to build their offices, and there are a lot of residential buildings as well. And as a Silicon Valley organization, Stanford doesn't just keep its money on the accounts, it reinvests its money into startups. And if you take several huge venture capital firms here in Silicon Valley, a lot of Stanford's money is there, reinvested in tech companies. By the way, I'm not a historian, and all the facts in this video are from open sources, like this book. Stanford is a truly entrepreneurial university. Its graduates have founded more than 18,000 companies. The revenue of those companies is approximately $2.7 trillion a year, and they have created 5.5 million jobs. If Stanford was a country, it would be the 7th largest economy in the world. And there are 30 billionaires who have graduated from Stanford and who are currently living. A lot of people consider Fred Terman to be the father of Silicon Valley. Fred Terman was an engineering professor at Stanford. He was born here in Palo Alto in the family of another Stanford's professor. And by the way, his father is famous for popularizing the IQ test. So this guy, Fred Terman, told his students, guys, don't go away from Stanford once you graduate. Don't go to the East Coast. Stay here and found your companies here. And the first students who listened to his advice were Hewlett and Packard, HP company that we all know these days. Fred Terman has done a couple more great things for Stanford. During the World War II, the Ministry of Defense has been distributing millions of dollars among top universities in the country. MIT got tens of millions of dollars. Harvard got tens of millions of dollars, and Stanford got $50,000. So Fred Terman decided that he needs to attract more money from the Ministry of Defense to Stanford, and under his management, Stanford started receiving more money. And by the way, Ministry of Defense is considered to be the first angel investor in Silicon Valley. There wasn't such name Silicon Valley back then. The place was called Santa Clara Valley, but there were already tech companies testing radios, testing different chips, and Ministry of Defense sponsored some of their ventures. In 1891, the 31st president, he wasn't president back then, President Hoover, started his education at Stanford. And he claimed that he was the first Stanford student because not only he was attending Stanford's classes, he also started living in a Stanford's dorm. And behind me is Hoover Tower. It was built to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Stanford, and it has President Hoover's name. Because I'm Silicon Valley girl, I get to work with amazing companies and try out amazing new devices. And today's video is sponsored by Hachi, and they have sent me an amazing device that uses a projector to turn any surface into a computer. You see, so for example, I'm at home doing something and I decided to sew a face mask myself. So instead of staring at the screen or having my iPhone, I would just use this device to project all the instructions onto my desk, and I will just go on and work from here. I really like that it works on any surface, so I just put it on my dining table and for example, I'm searching for how to, you see, I'm typing using my table. Oh my God, how to make, that feels surreal. Oh my God. Oh wow. Go. Here you go, fully functional. Oh my God. Video.
Yummy. I love me some cupcakes. I had a request to make vanilla cupcakes, so here we go.
Can you imagine
really
this?
Easy to make.
We're in the future. This is super convenient if I'm cooking, because before this device, I would use my iPhone, which would switch off eventually, turn off its screen, and my hands would be dirty because I will be baking, making stuff, and my iPhone would turn dirty and will stop responding to my actions. But here I just have everything right in front of my eyes. This device runs on an advanced CPU with a multi-core AI engine. It is based on the Android 9.0 platform and is highly customized to be its own operating system called Infinite OS. Hachi has an AI-integrated education application called Hachi AI Class. This means you can play the piano, draw, and play educational games using Hachi. So look at the instructions, I cook. I look at the instructions, I cook. And the most important thing is I don't have this screen that I'm staring at. I'm going to show you a house of my dreams. Welcome. Another feature that we have on this device, you just flip it, and guess what? It turns your wall into a screen. Isn't that great? And the last but not the least, I think it's a great tool to use to play with Emily, because I don't like her staring at the screens all the time. And whenever you're playing with kids, you don't want them to stare at the screen the whole day, but at the same time, you want them to do something interactive. And this is a great solution. Hachismart, the link will be below. When I talk to people from all over the world, they all ask me one question. Marina, why do you think Silicon Valley is where it is, and why is it not in a different place on our planet? And if you asked me this question in 2015 when we just came here, I would say because of the climate, because the climate here is amazing. But now, when I know a lot of stories, my answer would sound like this. So first of all, the Bay Area was historically a place for innovation. So for example, the first wireless signal was sent from a ship to the shore in San Francisco. And the first radio station in the US was also formed here in the Bay Area. Then we've already learned about Stanford. Stanford helped a lot of students found companies here in the Bay Area, innovative companies in the Bay Area like HP. US military was sponsoring a lot of research here in Silicon Valley, and this is why semiconductors started being produced here, and computers, the new computer industry, started using those semiconductors. And when in 1958 the SDIC Act was passed, private investors realized that the future is here, where the computer industry is, and this is why a lot of money from all over the world, from all over the US, started flowing into Silicon Valley. But it started booming in 1980 when Apple IPO'd at a valuation of $1.3 billion. And if you also know the history, the first internet signal was sent from Stanford Research Institute to UCLA. And this started the internet industry also here in Silicon Valley. And if you ask me, what would be the reason why something like Silicon Valley would evolve in another country, I would say when we realize what's the next internet, what's the next big thing. And if it starts in a different country, if the ecosystem starts evolving in that country, then investors would just invest their money into that country. But you need to have a good system there, because the US has, all the laws that regulate startups and investors. This would be my answer. We are slowly moving from Stanford to Palo Alto. Palo Alto is one of the busiest cities in Silicon Valley. The University Avenue here is full of different cafes and restaurants where every day investors meet entrepreneurs, founders meet each other in order to brainstorm ideas on how they're going to transform the world. And what I particularly like about Silicon Valley culture is that sometimes you only need to grab a cup of coffee with an investor to sign a term sheet and to get your first money. And this culture has been born here in Silicon Valley, and a lot of people say that it was born with HP. Hewlett and Packard were deciding whose name is going to be the first in the company's name, so they just flipped a coin and they decided that Hewlett is going to be the first name, and since then they haven't argued for 70 years. And people call this culture the HP way. And a lot of deals in Silicon Valley are done based on trust. So if you just promise the investor that you're gonna change the world, if you have a good business idea, there's a good chance you're gonna get money here in Silicon Valley. By the way, this is the iconic blue bottle. Because we're on a lockdown, there are no tables there, but in normal times, there are a lot of tables filled with investors, entrepreneurs, and if you listen to their conversations, you would hear words like Series A, IPO, change the world, billions of users. And when you listen to their conversations, you realize that this is the place where the world money is managed and where apps that affect our lives are created. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, before 1960s, there was no venture capital culture here in Silicon Valley, and it was called Santa Clara Valley. And there were two ways for companies to secure funding. First, they could get a military contract to fund their research, or they could go to a huge corporation and ask for money. But in 1958, an SDIC Act was passed, which meant that for every private dollar invested in a company, the government would invest the additional $4. And because the Bay Area was the place where semiconductors were produced that were later used in technology, a lot of private investors wanted to take part in it and invest their money. And this is how the whole culture started evolving. And this is the time where Sand Hill Road started evolving as well. And Sand Hill Road is a place where you have all the top venture capital companies here in Silicon Valley. And if you're an entrepreneur and you have a meeting on Sand Hill Road, this is a good sign that you are doing something great. Another factor that contributed to success in Silicon Valley, apart from support from the government, is that investors started seeing liquidity for their money here in the Bay Area, which means that if you invested in a small startup, then showed great results and went public, you get a lot of profit. And this happened right before the SBIC Act was passed. There is a local story here in Silicon Valley. Let me tell you the story first. One of the founders that we know was fundraising, and he got an offer from investors, but he was hesitant to take it. But then he walked down University Avenue and saw that the majority of stores are converted to stores that sell carpets, and he decided to take the money. Do you know why? The majority of buildings here are owned by a local Iranian family, and whenever economy starts hitting hard times and people stop affording offices here on the University Avenue, this Iranian family just starts selling carpets on the properties that they own. And whenever this starts happening, that means that the financial crisis is approaching. And the story happened back in 2007, a few months before the big financial crisis. And by the way, 1/3 of the University Avenue right now is carpet stores. We are in our last location for this video. I am currently in the backyard of a house that we're renting in Palo Alto in a neighborhood called Crescent Park. And this neighborhood has inspired me to create this exact video because during the first days when we arrived here, we started walking around and I saw amazing houses and I just started Googling them. And it's weird in the US that you can just Google the address and Google would give you the name of a current resident for some houses. And then you just Google the residence and you realize that you're surrounded by top venture investors, by top entrepreneurs. And I thought, oh my God, if I'm in this area, I just have to create a video about history of Silicon Valley, about people who built Silicon Valley because they surround me here. And sometimes I think that venture investors and prominent entrepreneurs should be as famous as Hollywood superstars because they are doing so much for this world. They're creating companies that change our lives. They create companies that allow us to make money, like YouTube, for example. And venture capitalists even have their own chart. The chart is called Midas List and is produced by Forbes. So this is like a ranking for world's best venture capitalists. One of the investors who's been on that list is Tim Draper, and I did an interview with him for this channel 1 month before Delivering Emily. So if you want to see that, I think it's an amazing interview. The link will be below. Check it out. What's exciting about Tim's family is that his granddad was actually the first venture capitalist. So once the SDIC Act was passed, the one that allowed private money to be invested in companies, his granddad formed a company with his friend and they started investing. His son, Bill Draper, did the same. He started his own venture capital firm. And Tim Draper was working as an associate for his father's company and he started his venture firm as well and ended up being on the Midas list. Another great person to talk about is Marc Andreessen. Marc Andreessen studied at the University of Illinois, and he started working on a graphic web browser during his undergraduate studies, and that browser was called Mosaic. After he graduated, he realized there is a huge potential in graphic web browsers, so he started working on another one and called it Netscape. Netscape had a tremendous success. It IPO'd successfully, and then Microsoft has noticed its success and thought, wow, we need our own graphic web browser. So Microsoft went back to the University of Illinois and licensed the Mosaic code. And this is when the famous browser war has started. Then in 1999, Marc Andreessen sold Netscape to AOL for over $4 billion, and he started his own venture capital fund called Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the prominent funds located here in Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road. I think I can go on for hours talking about amazing entrepreneurs who started here in Silicon Valley, who grew their companies to huge corporations. And another trend that's worth noting here is that a lot of successful entrepreneurs become venture capitalists after selling their companies because they want to help other entrepreneurs, because they understand the space. And because I've been fundraising myself, and I've been fundraising in different countries, I can tell you that Silicon Valley is this huge concentration of amazingly talented people, amazingly talented venture capitalists, because when you sit down with somebody who, grew Yelp to millions of users, or who grew Airbnb to millions of users, and you ask them for advice, their advice is super practical because they had a similar business model, they know what works, and it's just amazing that this geographical small area has this huge concentration of amazing people that you can reach out to, that you can ask for help, that you can schedule a meeting with. And I can tell you that the best VC funds would always get back to you, even if you're just writing a cold email, even if you're just starting out with your project, they would always get back to you. Yes, they would probably say that you're too early for us, whatever, but you would always get an answer from them, and this is the Silicon Valley culture. Thank you guys so much for watching this video up to the very end. I hope you enjoyed this content. Let me know if you enjoyed this kind of content. I will be looking for comments down below because this is something I can talk about for hours, as I mentioned. And when I was at school, I think I hated history. I didn't like reading about wars. I didn't like reading about people killing each other. But once I started learning about Silicon Valley's history, I realized this is one of my favorite subjects on planet Earth. I just like reading about how entrepreneurs built their lives, how they succeeded, and which problems they encountered on their way to the top. Again, guys, thank you so much. Please subscribe to this channel and like this video if you've enjoyed this content. And I will see you very soon in my next videos. Bye-bye.